And then the final one that I want to talk about is interesting because one of these teams could be a wild card team, but more realistically, this is why I want to talk about these two teams together. This division race is not over, and that is the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Tennessee Titans, something that we didn't necessarily think would be happening, but the Titans just lost to Jacksonville. They are now 7-6. Jacksonville is 5-8. Those records don't feel super close, but they do play each other again on the final game of the year. And to end the season, they have quite similar schedules. So for the Jaguars, and both of them have very tough games this week. The Jaguars play my Cowboys, but then they play the Jets, but then they play the Texans, and they finalize it with a rematch against the Titans. And then the Titans, they play the Chargers, then they also play the Texans, then they play my Cowboys as well, and then they play the Jaguars too. So just based on these schedules for both teams, I mean, the Jaguars would need to win 3 of these most likely, and they would need the Titans to drop some of these. I'm assuming both teams are going to beat Houston. So I'm kind of chalking that up to a win for both teams, which would put Tennessee at 8 wins, which once again means Jacksonville has to win 3. But because they play each other, that kind of potentially goes well in their favor. But how do you feel about this potential division race?
I think Tennessee will still handle their business and win the division. Like I said, I foresee them beating the Chargers this week. And even if they do, they still play Texans. We kind of chalk it up as a win. And as good as your Cowboys are, we've seen they can kind of be run on, and that's the Texans' strength. So that would be an interesting matchup. Although, once again, and Dallas, and we mentioned Dak's kind of been over aggressive, turn the ball over a bit, which favors the Titans. And then, who even knows how the last matchup will go? Like, even if the Titans were to screw the pooch, so to say, and then, the last game's a decider against the Jags. Although they lost this time, like it took a Trevor Lawrence kind of a Herculean performance, and I would imagine by then they have a healthy Traylon Burks. I could foresee Tennessee, winning that one. But like I said, because I think they're going to beat the Texans and the Chargers, I think that itself would be enough to get them in the playoffs in regards to winning the division. But what about you?
Yeah, I think Tennessee should get in, but the games that I think are really going to be the key indicators here are, number one, this week against the Chargers. If they beat the Chargers, it's really unlikely that Jacksonville can pass them because then they have the Texans game. So that's going to be tough. But if they lose to the Chargers, things open up the door. And then if hypothetically the Titans do lose to the Chargers, and regardless of what happens in the Jaguars-Cowboys game, the Jaguars-Jets game would be incredibly important, and the Titans-Cowboys game would be incredibly important, because if my Cowboys could beat the Titans, that really opens the door for Jacksonville if they had beaten the Jets at that point. Because once again, I'm assuming both teams will have beaten the Texans, and then they would have that matchup in the final week of the season, which part of me is hoping that scenario happens where it's like a win and get in scenario for either team in that game, because that would just be really awesome. It'd feel like a playoff game. But yeah, I think the tough part is that the Titans have this 2-game lead already. So if they win any of these kind of games, like against the Chargers, against my Cowboys, or even if they just beat Jacksonville outright at the end of the year, the Jaguars kind of lose any of their hope for winning the division. There's still a possibility that they could make the playoffs if the Jaguars were able to sweep and the Titans still somehow won the division by beating the Chargers, the Cowboys, as well as the Texans. That's still possible, but unlikely, because at 5-8, they got to sweep, win all 4, and they would need some help from some of these other teams like the Patriots, Dolphins, Chargers, Jets to kind of have a just disaster class to end the season. So unlikely the Jaguars make the playoffs, but still interesting nonetheless. So